The cold, clear light of a Swedish autumn afternoon often found its way into the burgling apartment in Östermalm, filtering through the tall windows and illuminating dust motes dancing in the quiet air. It was a light that spoke of clean lines, of understated elegance, much like the city of Stockholm itself. But within the confines of Tim Bergling's room, the world outside often receded, replaced by the electric hum of a desktop computer and the vibrant, kaleidoscopic landscapes forming on his screen. He was a quiet child, even then, a boy of sharp, observant eyes and a mind that seemed to hum with an unheard frequency. Born in the late 80s, he came of age as the digital frontier began to stretch its infinite possibilities before the youth of the world, and Tim, in his introverted curiosity, found his true north in its boundless expanse. His father, Klaus, a steady, grounded presence, and his mother, Anki, an actress whose life was often a whirlwind of public performance, understood his need for solitude, recognizing a deep well of creativity that needed its own space to form. They watched him, not with concern, but with a gentle fascination, as he retreated further into the glowing rectangle, his fingers dancing across the keyboard and mouse with an almost ritualistic grace. It was in the early 2000s, when the world was still grappling with the nascent power of the internet, that Tim truly began to find his voice. He discovered Florida Studio, a digital audio workstation that felt less like a tool and more like an extension of his own nascent imagination. The software, with its colorful interface and endless possibilities, became his playground, his laboratory, his confessional. Here, in the quiet sanctuary of his room, surrounded by the faint scent of plastic and the subtle warmth radiating from the computer tower, he could sculpt sound, layer melodies, and conjure rhythms from the ether. He would spend hours, the world outside fading into a distant murmur, lost in the intricate dance of beats and synths. The click of the mouse, the soft thud of the keyboard, the muffled thrum of a bass line through his headphones, these were the sounds of his nascent universe. He wasn't just making music, he was building worlds, intricate sonic tapestries woven from digital threads, each one a reflection of the emotions churning within him. He rarely spoke of his creations, not in explicit terms anyway. The music itself was his language, raw and experimental, often fragmented, but always brimming with a nascent energy, a quiet promise of something profound. He would upload these nascent tracks to obscure online forums, digital whispers into the void, seeking not fame, but connection, a shared understanding with others who spoke the same electronic dialect. It was an intimate, formative period, a time when the burgeoning digital landscape offered boundless creative freedom to a curious, introverted mind driven by an inherent passion for sound and a nascent desire to express himself. The transition from bedroom prodigy to a name whispered in online circles began subtly, like a ripple expanding on a still pond. By the late 2000s, Avicii, a name he had chosen, a clever play on the lowest level of Buddhist hell, yet sounding like a beacon, was no longer just a username. It was a burgeoning identity. He would upload his tracks, not just to forums, but to larger platforms, and the feedback started to trickle in, then flow. It wasn't just anonymous praise, it was recognition from established figures in the burgeoning electronic music scene. One such figure was Lucas Cornelis van Scheppingen, better known as Laid Back Luke, a Dutch DJ and producer with an ear for raw talent. Luke's message, a digital handshake across continents, felt like the first real crack in the wall of Tim's solitary creative existence. It was a signal, a verification that his quiet experiments held a power that resonated beyond his headphones. The air around Tim began to crackle with a different kind of energy, one that felt both exhilarating and slightly terrifying. He was excited, yes, a thrill vibrating beneath his skin, but also slightly overwhelmed by the sudden recognition. Youthful modesty still clung to him like a second skin, a desire to prove himself, to show that this wasn't just a fluke. Ash Pornori, a Swedish music executive with a keen eye and an even keener ambition, saw in Avicii not just talent, but destiny. Their meeting felt less like a business negotiation and more like an alignment of stars. Ash spoke of vision, of global stages, of a sound that could redefine a generation. Tim, still navigating the awkwardness of newfound attention, listened, his quiet confidence burgeoning, yet still tempered by a deep-seated humility. He signed with Ash, and the world, in a way, began to sign with him. The release of early tracks like Man Man, and, more significantly, Bromance, marked the true dawn of Avicii. These weren't just tracks, they were anthems in waiting, pulsing with an infectious energy that found its way into the global club scene. The bass lines rumbled through dark, crowded rooms, the melodies soared, and suddenly, people were dancing to Tim's creations, thousands of miles away from his quiet room in Stockholm. He would see videos, grainy and shaky, of DJs in Ibiza or Miami dropping his tracks, and a wave of disbelief, mingled with profound satisfaction, would wash over him. It was a vibrant dawn, an accessible musical era where talent could emerge from anywhere, from any quiet bedroom with a computer and a dream. The world was changing, and Avicii was, unknowingly, at its vanguard. Then came the year that changed everything, the year a single track didn't just gain traction, but exploded, reverberating through every corner of the globe. The year was 2011, and the track was Levels. The melody, born from a sample of Etta James's Something's Got a Hold on Me, possessed an undeniable, uplifting quality that felt both timeless and utterly fresh. Tim had poured his essence into it, a distillation of that early joy he found in Florida studio, amplified and refined. When it hit, it didn't just climb the charts, it conquered them. Levels catapulted Avicii into unprecedented international stardom, transforming him from a promising talent to a global phenomenon in what felt like an instant. The world became a blur of flashing lights, roaring crowds, and the ceaseless thrum of bass. He embarked on massive world tours, the names of cities bleeding into one another, time zones becoming an abstract concept. Headlining major festivals like Ultra Music Festival in Miami was no longer a distant dream, but a dizzying reality. Standing on those colossal stages, the air thick with sweat and anticipation, looking out at a sea of tens of thousands of faces, all moving in unison to his music, was an experience beyond words. The euphoria was intoxicating, a potent drug that coursed through his veins. The energy of the crowd was a palpable force, lifting him, carrying him, making him feel invincible. The lights, synchronized to every beat, painted the night sky in brilliant, ephemeral strokes, and the sound, a physical presence, vibrated through his very bones. It was exhilarating, a whirlwind, almost dreamlike in its intensity, yet terrifyingly real. He was triumphant, yes, in those moments, a sense of profound accomplishment washing over him. But beneath the surface, a subtle disorientation began to set in. The sheer speed and scale of his success were overwhelming. He was grappling with the demands of newfound fame, the constant travel, the relentless schedule that demanded more and more of his time, his energy, his very being. The quiet boy who found solace in the digital ether was now standing before millions, a public figure, an icon, and the transition was jarring. He slept on planes, woke in different countries, ate on the go, and often found himself wondering, in the brief moments of silence, if this glittering, demanding life was truly his own. The year 2012 arrived, and with it, the full, crushing weight of the machine he had inadvertently helped create. The euphoria of Levels had morphed into the relentless grind of Levels, levels of expectation, levels of performance, levels of demand. Avicii's touring schedule became unsustainable, a dizzying carousel of hundreds of shows a year. One city blurred into the next, one airport lounge indistinguishable from another. The private jets, once a symbol of luxury, became claustrophobic capsules of exhaustion. He would step off a stage, drenched in sweat, adrenaline still thrumming through him, only to be whisked away to another plane, another hotel, another sound check in a matter of hours. The pressures were immense, maintaining creative output, constantly traveling, the ever-present performance anxiety that gnawed at him before every set. He loved the music, the act of creation, the connection with the crowd, but the lifestyle was slowly, insidiously, beginning to chip away at him. Early signs of physical and mental strain began to manifest. His stomach, always a sensitive barometer of his stress, began to ache with a dull, persistent throb. Sleep became a luxury, often elusive, and when it came, it was fitful, haunted by the echoes of bass and the flash of strobe lights. It was then, in the suffocating embrace of this relentless, glittering machine, that he began to find a temporary, dangerous solace. Alcohol, a few drinks before a show to calm the nerves, to dull the edge of anxiety, to make the endless travel feel a little less taxing. The warmth of the liquid spreading through him, the momentary blur of worry, the false sense of ease it offered a fleeting escape from the intensity. He wasn't the only one, he saw it in the eyes of other DJs, the weary smiles, the shared understanding of the sheer, brutal pace of their world. The high-stakes environment demanded constant feeding, and as he poured another glass, he felt the darker underbelly of his dream begin to reveal itself. He was anxious, increasingly exhausted, caught in a growing internal conflict between his ambition to succeed and a dawning, terrifying awareness of the toll on his well-being. He knew, deep down, this couldn't last. Early 2013 brought a desperate need for artistic renewal, a yearning to push past the boundaries that had defined his sound. Tim, ever the innovator, felt a powerful urge to evolve, to infuse his electronic roots with new, organic textures. He retreated to the studio, finding a temporary respite from the relentless touring, channeling his burgeoning internal turmoil into a new creative direction. He began to experiment, blending the pulsating beats of EDM with the soulful twang of folk, the raw storytelling of country, and the rich harmonies of soul. It was a risky move, a departure from the sound that had made him a global superstar, but it felt vital, a necessary artistic liberation. The result was Wake Me Up, a track born from this daring fusion, featuring the distinctive, powerful voice of American singer-songwriter Aloe Blacc. Working with trusted collaborators like Carl Falk, Salem Al Fakir, and Vincent Pontara, Tim sculpted a sound that was both instantly recognizable and utterly groundbreaking. The recording sessions were a whirlwind of creative energy, a joyous exploration of new sonic landscapes. Aloe Blacc's voice, imbued with a soulful gravitas, soared over Tim's innovative production, creating an anthem that transcended genre. It was a moment of profound artistic fulfillment, a testament to his innate ability to craft melodies that resonated universally. The release of Wake Me Up, and the subsequent album, True, solidified his superstar status even further, proving that his genius was not confined to a single sound. The album was a critical and commercial triumph, celebrated for its adventurous spirit and emotional depth. It was a period of immense creative pride for Tim, a validation of his artistic vision. Yet, the irony was cruel. Greater artistic success only intensified the touring demands. The world wanted more of this new, evolved Avicii, and the machine, once again, roared to life, hungrier than ever. The touring schedule, already unsustainable, became a relentless beast. The physical and mental fragility that had begun to surface in 2012 was exacerbated, pushed to its breaking point. The subtle aches in his stomach intensified, evolving into sharp, searing pains that could no longer be ignored or dulled by alcohol alone. He was performing night after night, often through a haze of discomfort, his public smile masking a growing internal agony. It was during this intensified period that the inevitable happened, his first major public health scare. A sudden, debilitating collapse, a frantic rush to a hospital, the terrifying diagnosis that would forever alter the trajectory of his life. He was creatively fulfilled and immensely proud of his artistic evolution, yet physically and mentally fragile, experiencing a growing, suffocating sense of being trapped by the very success he had so passionately created. The world, it seemed, was always hungry for more, endlessly subscribing to the narrative of his genius, eager for the next beat, the next story, the next notification of his unfolding, tumultuous life. But in the midst of this insatiable demand, something fundamental began to fray, then tear, within Tim. The subtle aches in his stomach, which had been a low, persistent thrum beneath the surface of his adrenaline-fueled existence, escalated dramatically in the mid to late stretch of 2013. They ceased to be mere discomforts, transforming into searing, incapacitating spasms that doubled him over, stealing his breath and clarity. The vibrant, thumping stages, once his sanctuary of sound, now felt like crucibles of pain. He would finish a set, sweat plastering his hair to his forehead, the roar of the crowd still echoing in his ears, only to collapse backstage, his body a trembling mess. The easy smiles he offered to the cameras, the confident hand gestures to the crowd, were becoming increasingly difficult to maintain, a mask worn over a face contorted in silent agony. His team, initially attributing it to exhaustion or the inevitable stresses of his lifestyle, soon realized the gravity of the situation. The hurried consultations with local doctors, the emergency room visits in unfamiliar cities, became a terrifying, recurring nightmare. One particularly brutal episode saw him airlifted from a festival site, the flashing lights of the ambulance a stark, unwelcome contrast to the euphoric strobes he had just left. The sterile scent of hospitals, a clinical counterpoint to the heady perfume of dry ice and adrenaline, became his new, unwelcome reality. It was there, amidst the hushed beeps of medical equipment and the low murmur of nurses, that the diagnosis finally landed: acute pancreatitis. It was a severe inflammation of the pancreas, a direct and brutal consequence, doctors explained, of his lifestyle, the relentless stress, the irregular eating, and, most damningly, the excessive alcohol consumption he adopted to cope. The words hung in the air, heavy and damning. Pancreatitis. It sounded like a death sentence to his career, a brutal betrayal from the very body that had carried him through the dizzying heights of global stardom. Multiple hospitalizations followed, each one a stark reminder of his vulnerability. The IV drips became a constant companion, the bland hospital food a bitter contrast to the gourmet meals he often barely touched on tour. His parents, Klaus and Anki, flew to be by his side whenever possible, their faces etched with worry. Klaus, always the stoic anchor, would sit by his bed, holding his hand, his presence a silent well of strength. Anki, with her expressive actress's eyes, would simply watch him, a profound sadness in her gaze that mirrored Tim's own dawning fear. Ash Pornori, his manager, was a blur of phone calls and urgent negotiations, rescheduling, canceling, apologizing. The cancellations were a heavy blow, not just financially, but to Tim's own sense of responsibility. He felt the weight of disappointed fans, the intricate logistics of an entire touring apparatus grinding to a halt because he was broken. He was fearful, yes, a cold dread twisting in his gut, but also deeply frustrated. Frustrated with his body for failing him, frustrated with himself for allowing it to happen, and frustrated with the relentless machine that seemed to demand his very essence until there was nothing left. This period marked the beginning of a difficult, insidious cycle of recovery and relapse. He would be discharged, feeling a fragile sense of hope, determined to change, to find a healthier balance. He would try to eat better, to rest more, to avoid alcohol. But the pressure to perform, to produce, to simply be Avicii, was immense, an invisible hand pushing him back towards the precipice. The pain would recede, only to return with a vengeance, a cruel reminder that his body, once a vessel for his boundless energy, was now a fragile, aching cage. He looked out at the world from his hospital window, seeing the hazy glow of city lights, knowing that somewhere out there, a crowd was waiting, and he felt a profound, painful realization of the severe impact his relentless lifestyle was having on his physical health and, terrifyingly, on his future. The euphoria of his public image had evaporated, revealing the stark, fragile reality beneath. The year turned, rolling into early 2014, and the battle within Tim took on a new, more insidious form. The acute pancreatitis, while eventually stabilizing, had left its mark. The pain, though less acute, lingered, a dull ache that seemed to reside permanently in his abdomen, a constant, unwelcome companion. Following his surgeries, the removal of his gallbladder and appendix, performed in an attempt to alleviate the chronic inflammation, he was prescribed powerful painkillers. OxyContin, specifically, the little white pills, initially a godsend, a miraculous balm that quieted the incessant throb, soon became something more. The shift was subtle at first, almost imperceptible. A dull ache would flare, and the pill would bring relief. Then, the ache would return slightly sooner, or with a little more intensity, demanding another dose. The prescribed schedule blurred, then dissolved, replaced by an internal clock dictated by pain and the desire for its swift eradication. The quiet battle unfolded behind the scenes, away from the flashing lights and adoring crowds, hidden from the public eye. His manager, Ash, saw the exhaustion, the drawn lines around Tim's eyes, but the true depth of his struggle with the medication remained a shadowed, deceptive secret. Tim found himself caught in a cruel paradox. He needed to maintain his demanding music production schedule, to churn out new tracks, to keep the Avicii machine fed. He also needed to heal, to rest, to escape the very pressures that fueled his dependency. He would sit in his studio, surrounded by the glow of his computer screens, the intricate melodies forming in his mind, but his focus would often waver, pulled by the insistent whisper of pain, the promise of relief. He tried to manage it, to rationalize it. It was for the pain, he told himself, not for anything else. But deep down, a growing, insidious awareness began to prick at his conscience. The pills made the world feel softer, less demanding, less real. They created a veil, dulling not just the physical pain, but the mental anguish, the anxiety that constantly buzzed beneath his skin. He felt conflicted, isolated. How could he explain this to anyone? How could he admit that the very medicine meant to heal him was now holding him captive? The shame was a bitter taste in his mouth, mingling with the metallic tang of the pills. He would often self-medicate, calculating doses, stretching them, always aware of the dwindling supply. The quiet moments in his Los Angeles home, meant for rest and recovery, were instead consumed by this internal struggle. The sun would stream through the vast windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, but Tim felt shrouded in a perpetual shadow, a solitary figure wrestling with a problem he couldn't share. The immediate physical relief offered by the medication was a siren song, lulling him into a dangerous complacency, even as the growing, insidious awareness of a new and dangerous problem tightened its grip. He was losing control, and the thought was a cold, sharp blade to his heart. As 2014 progressed into its mid to late stages, Tim, in a desperate attempt to regain some semblance of control and escape the tightening grip of his dependencies, retreated. Not just from the touring circuit but into the sanctuary of his creative space. The studio, always a haven, now became his fortress, a place where the noise of the world, and the insistent demands of his aching body, could be momentarily silenced. He found solace and escape in the pure act of creation, a desperate yearning to channel his internal chaos into something beautiful, something meaningful. He immersed himself in music, the intricate dance of sounds and melodies a balm to his frayed nerves. The collaborative spirit, which had always fueled his best work, became a lifeline. He invited trusted friends and musical partners into his world, people like Carl Falk, Salem Al Fakir, and Vincent Pontara. The air in the studio would often be thick with the scent of coffee and the quiet hum of equipment, punctuated by bursts of laughter and the focused intensity of shared creativity. Tim, with his quiet intensity, would sit at the console, fingers dancing over the keys, his mind a whirlwind of ideas. He was attempting to find a healthier balance, a way to be Avicii without destroying Tim. This period saw the genesis and release of tracks like The Days and The Nights. These songs, born from a place of introspection and a yearning for meaning, carried a hopeful, reflective quality. They spoke of seizing moments, of living fully, themes that resonated deeply with Tim's own struggle to reclaim his life. The process was slow, painstaking, but deeply fulfilling. He would spend hours dissecting a melody, perfecting a beat, layering vocals until the sound was exactly right. He felt temporarily revitalized, finding renewed purpose in creation and collaboration. The sheer joy of crafting music, of seeing an idea blossom into a fully formed track, was a powerful antidote to the anxieties that still simmered beneath the surface. Carl Falk, observing Tim during these sessions, noted a fragile piece in him. He was in his element, Carl recalled later, genuinely happy when he was just making music, no pressure, just pure creation. The studio was a temporary haven, a sanctuary from the pressures of the road, a place where the opiates, though still a presence, felt less urgent, less demanding. He could lose himself for hours in the intricate tapestry of sound, the pain in his body receding into the background, replaced by the vibrant pulse of his own artistic heart. He felt a flicker of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, he could find a way to exist in this world, to create, without being consumed by it. But even in these moments of artistic renewal, the underlying anxieties and health concerns, like persistent shadows, still lingered, waiting for an opportunity to resurface. The quiet whispers of the world outside the studio walls, demanding more, were never truly silenced. The fragile respite, however, was destined to be short-lived. As early 2015 dawned, the whispers from the world outside the studio walls grew into a clamor, then a roar. Despite Tim's health struggles, despite his personal desires for a slower pace, for a life less consumed by the road, the immense pressures from management, his team, and the industry at large began to close in. The Avicii machine, once paused, was now demanding to be fed, to be restarted. There were contracts, commitments, expectations of millions of fans worldwide. Ash Pornori, ever the visionary, also felt the weight of these expectations. He saw the potential, the unfinished business, the global demand. He pushed, gently at first, then with increasing insistence. Tim, the world needs your music, he might have said, or, we have to capitalize on this momentum. The arguments were logical, compelling, yet they felt like chains tightening around Tim's already strained spirit. The phone calls from his team became more frequent, the emails more urgent. The industry, a leviathan that had propelled him to unimaginable heights, now seemed intent on dragging him back into the very cycle he had so desperately tried to escape. Tim felt a deep sense of dread, a chilling premonition of what awaited him. He had known this day would come, but the reality of it felt like a physical blow. The internal conflict between his desire to perform, to share his music, and his deteriorating health became increasingly evident. In public appearances, his smiles seemed a little more forced, his eyes a little more vacant. Interviews revealed a weariness that even his most practiced charm couldn't fully conceal. He spoke of needing breaks, of finding balance, but the words felt hollow, even to himself, as he knew the juggernaut was already rolling. He was drawn back into the relentless touring schedule, a return to the unsustainable cycle he had desperately tried to escape. The private jets, the luxurious hotels, the adoring crowds, they all now felt like gilded cages. Each flight was a descent into exhaustion, each performance a draining of his already depleted reserves. He found himself standing on stages, under the blinding lights, his body aching, his mind a whirlwind of anxiety, wondering how he could possibly continue. The roar of the crowd, once a source of euphoria, now often felt like a deafening demand, 1,000 voices crying out for a piece of him he no longer had to give. He would call his parents, his voice sometimes thin with fatigue, sometimes laced with a quiet despair. Klaus and Anki listened, their hearts heavy, feeling powerless against the momentum of a global phenomenon. Tim felt resigned, increasingly overwhelmed, experiencing a profound sense of powerlessness as he was drawn back into the lifestyle that had caused him so much pain. The glittering machine, relentless and demanding, had him in its grasp once more, and he could see no immediate escape. The sense of inevitability hung over him like a shroud, a heavy curtain falling over the fleeting hope he had found in the quiet solace of his studio. He was Avicii again, but a version of Avicii that was slowly, painfully, eroding Tim Bergling. Late 2015 saw the release of his second album, Stories. It was a project born amidst profound inner turmoil, a complex, poignant collection of tracks that subtly reflected his internal struggles and growth. Unlike True, which had burst forth with a raw, genre-bending energy, Stories felt more introspective, more nuanced. It was a tapestry woven from diverse sounds and collaborations, a testament to his continued artistic evolution, even as his personal world fractured. Working on Stories had been a bittersweet experience. In the studio, surrounded by collaborators like Carl Falk, Salem Al Fakir, and Vincent Pontera, Tim found moments of intense creative joy. He pushed boundaries, experimented with new vocalists, and delved into deeper lyrical themes. Tracks like Broken Arrows and For a Better Day showcased a maturity, a vulnerability that hinted at the unseen battles he was fighting. The music was a canvas for his pain, his hope, his yearning for connection. He was creatively proud of the album's depth, of the way it pushed his sound forward, proving that he was more than just a purveyor of anthemic EDM. It was an artistic statement, a desperate search for meaning amidst the chaos of his life. But the release of Stories did not bring the respite he craved. Instead, it triggered another grueling tour schedule, designed to support the album and capitalize on its critical reception. The cycle of travel, performance, and exhaustion resumed with a vengeance. The relentless demands on his body and mind, already pushed to their limits, became unbearable. Public appearances became increasingly difficult. Fans, though adoring, began to notice the subtle changes, the gauntness in his face, the occasional tremor in his hands, the distant look in his eyes. There were more cancellations, more apologies from his team, more frantic reshuffling of dates. Each cancellation was a public declaration of his deteriorating well-being, a stark contrast to the vibrant, energetic image of Avicii the world expected. The media, ever vigilant, began to speculate, whispering about burnout, about the pressures of fame. Tim read the articles, saw the concerned comments online, and felt a profound sense of shame and entrapment. He was physically and mentally broken, a ghost moving through the motions of his own spectacular success. The constant travel, the lack of sleep, the lingering physical pain, and the insidious battle with dependency continued to chip away at him. He yearned for control, for a way to stop the merry-go-round that was spinning faster and faster, threatening to throw him off entirely. He wanted his life back, his health back, his future back. But the Avicii machine, once set in motion, seemed impossible to halt. He was trapped, a prisoner of his own creation, and the desperate yearning for freedom, for control over his own life, health, and future, grew into a silent, urgent scream within his soul. The depth of his personal struggle, subtly reflected in the poignant melodies of Stories, remained largely unseen, a hidden narrative beneath the glittering facade of his global fame. The decision arrived not as a sudden flash, but as a slow, inexorable tide washing over Tim Bergling in the early months of 2016. The Stories tour had been the final, brutal straw, a relentless assault on a body and mind already ravaged. He had carried the weight of it, the constant pain, the gnawing anxiety, the insidious whisper of dependency, through countless airports and onto hundreds of stages. Each performance, once a source of pure exhilaration, had become an act of profound endurance, a public facade maintained through sheer willpower. The applause, once a life-giving roar, now felt like a deafening clamor demanding more than he had left to give. He remembered a particular night, perhaps in Australia or Japan, the details blurred by exhaustion, when he stood on stage, the lights blinding, the bass vibrating through his very bones, and felt absolutely nothing. No joy, no connection, just a vast, echoing emptiness. It was as if Tim Bergling had vanished, replaced by an automaton, performing the role of Avicii. That night, the realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He was dying, slowly, on that stage, for the entertainment of millions. The machine, once his dream, had become his executioner. The conversations leading up to the announcement were difficult, fraught with emotion. His parents, Klaus and Anki, had witnessed his decline firsthand, their hearts breaking with each public cancellation, each strained phone call. They had seen the fear in his eyes, the hollow spaces where his vibrant spirit used to reside. Klaus, ever the pragmatist, understood the business implications, the sheer scale of what Tim was proposing. But as a father, he saw the desperate need for survival in his son's weary gaze. Anki, with her deep empathy, simply held him, tears often welling in her own eyes as Tim spoke of his exhaustion, his pain, his profound desire to simply stop. Ash Pornori, his longtime manager, was initially resistant, then incredulous, then, finally, devastated. He had poured years of his life into building Avicii, into nurturing that raw talent into a global phenomenon. The thought of it ending, of the touring machine grinding to a halt at its absolute peak, was almost unfathomable. There were arguments, passionate and desperate, about the contracts, the commitments, the legacy. But Tim's resolve, hardened by years of suffering, was unshakable. "I can't do this anymore, Ash," he had said, his voice quiet but firm. "I will die if I keep going." The words hung between them, stark and undeniable. The letter he drafted, eventually posted to his website and shared across social media, was meticulously worded, a heartfelt attempt to explain the unexplainable to a world that adored him. He sat at his computer, the cursor blinking on the blank page, his hands trembling slightly as he began to type. Each sentence was weighed, each word chosen with care. He spoke of gratitude, of the incredible journey, of the love for his fans. But beneath the surface, the subtext screamed of a man desperate for freedom, for breath, for life. "My path has been filled with success, but it has not come without its bumps," he wrote, the understatement a testament to his innate modesty. "I have become an adult while growing up with it. I have come to know myself better and realize that there is so much I want to do with my life. I have strong interests in different areas, but there is so little time to explore them." The words were a quiet declaration of war against the industry's relentless demands, a defiant act of self-preservation. When the announcement finally broke, it sent shockwaves across the globe. The headline, "Avicii retires from touring," exploded across news feeds, igniting a firestorm of reactions. Fans expressed a mix of profound sadness, understanding, and disbelief. How could someone at the absolute pinnacle of their career, a titan of electronic music, simply walk away? Fellow artists, many of whom secretly battled similar demons, offered messages of support and solidarity, recognizing the immense courage it took. David Guetta, a contemporary and fellow superstar DJ, spoke of the brutal demands of the global circuit, acknowledging the unspoken toll it took on so many. Laid-back Luke, who had first seen the nascent spark in Tim, expressed a bittersweet understanding, knowing the quiet boy he once championed had been caught in a storm. For Tim, the immediate aftermath was a strange cocktail of emotions. A profound, almost dizzying relief washed over him, like a suffocating weight had been lifted from his chest. He could breathe again, truly breathe, for the first time in years. The constant hum of anxiety, the relentless pressure, the looming dread of the next flight, the next stage, it all receded, replaced by an unfamiliar quiet. But beneath the relief, a subtle apprehension began to stir. What would life be like without the roar of the crowd, the pulsating energy of a festival? Who was Tim Bergling without Avicii? He had defied the expectations of a global industry, yes, but now he had to navigate a new path, an uncharted territory outside the intense glare of the spotlight. He was determined to reclaim his life, to heal his body and mind, but the road ahead, he knew, would be long and fraught with its own challenges. The freedom he had fought for felt both exhilarating and terrifyingly vast. With the public announcement made, a new chapter, fragile and uncertain, began for Tim. He retreated from the public eye with a deliberate, almost desperate urgency. His sprawling home in the Hollywood Hills of Los Angeles, once a brief stopover between tours, now became his primary sanctuary, a tranquil fortress against the lingering echoes of his past life. The sprawling glass walls offered panoramic views of the city, glittering beneath the Californian sun, but inside, the atmosphere was one of quiet introspection, a stark contrast to the thumping energy of his former existence. The air, often thick with the scent of jasmine from the garden and the faint, earthy aroma of sage he burned, felt lighter, less suffocating. He immersed himself in a disciplined regimen of healing, a holistic approach that touched every facet of his being. The focus was intense, almost obsessive. He sought out alternative therapies, eager to explore paths beyond the conventional medical treatments that had felt so impersonal and, ultimately, inadequate. Days often began with long, solitary walks through the canyon trails near his home, the only sounds the crunch of gravel underfoot and the distant chirping of birds. He'd feel the sun on his skin, the cool morning air filling his lungs, a visceral connection to the natural world that had been denied to him for so long. He experimented with meditation, sitting cross-legged in silent rooms, attempting to quiet the incessant chatter of his mind, to find an inner stillness that had eluded him for years. Yoga became a physical anchor, stretching out the knots of tension that had accumulated in his body, a gentle reconnection with his physical self. His diet shifted dramatically, focusing on clean, nourishing foods, a conscious effort to repair the damage inflicted by years of neglect and abuse. He read voraciously, devouring books on philosophy, spirituality, and self-help, seeking answers, seeking understanding. He spent extended periods traveling abroad, not for shows, but for quiet reflection. He visited remote beaches, hiked through lush forests, seeking places where the noise of humanity was muted, where he could simply be. These travels were less about adventure and more about stripping away the layers of his celebrity persona, reconnecting with the core of Tim Bergling. Yet, even in these tranquil, introspective settings, the deep psychological scars of his past experiences and dependencies lingered, like faint, phantom pains. The anxiety, though less acute, would still flare, sometimes unexpectedly, a sudden tightening in his chest, a rapid pulse. The cravings for the opiates, though no longer a daily battle, would resurface in moments of stress or vulnerability, a whisper in the back of his mind that he had to consciously, painstakingly, push away. He wrestled with a profound sense of guilt, a lingering feeling that he had somehow failed, despite the immense success. The quiet of his new life, while welcome, also amplified the internal dialogue, leaving him nowhere to hide from his own thoughts. He confided in close friends, like Dr. Ali Godse, a mental health professional whose insights offered a lifeline. Ali understood the complexities of addiction, the insidious nature of anxiety, and provided a safe space for Tim to articulate his struggles without judgment. These conversations, often long and emotionally draining, were crucial. Tim was hopeful for genuine recovery, seeking inner peace and a sense of normalcy, a life where he could simply exist without the crushing weight of expectation. But he knew, with a painful clarity, that this was a fragile period, a delicate balance he had to guard fiercely. The peace he found in nature, in meditation, in the quiet hum of his home, was hard-won, a constant effort to keep the shadows of his past at bay. The quiet solitude, however, could only hold Tim for so long. The innate passion for music, a force as fundamental as breathing for him, began to stir once more. It was not a conscious decision to return to the fray, but an undeniable, almost biological imperative. The melodies would simply start to form in his mind, unbidden, intricate and compelling. He would wake with a bass line thrumming in his head, or a soaring synth melody demanding to be captured. The studio, which had been a place of retreat and healing, slowly transformed back into a vibrant workshop of creation. He approached this new phase of music making with a newfound sense of control and purpose. There were no deadlines imposed by a relentless tour schedule, no pressure to churn out hits for the next festival season. This was music for music's sake, an exploration of sound on his own terms. His studio, sleek and modern, bathed in the soft glow of monitors, became his personal laboratory once more. The air would fill with the rich, layered textures of his evolving sound, a blend of the electronic innovation he was known for, infused with the introspection and emotional depth he had gained through his journey. Collaborations became a source of immense joy and creative rejuvenation. He reconnected with trusted partners like Carl Falk, whose understanding of Tim's musical language was almost telepathic. He also sought out new voices, new perspectives, eager to infuse his work with fresh energy. The process was slower, more deliberate, allowing for true experimentation and refinement. Carl Falk later recounted how different these sessions felt. It was Tim again, he said, the Tim who just loved making music, without all the baggage. They would spend hours on a single chord progression, dissecting every nuance, every emotional resonance. There was a lightness, a freedom in the creative process that had been absent for years. This period saw the creation and eventual release of the Avicii EP in early 2017. It was a powerful statement, a testament to his enduring talent and his continued desire for artistic expression, even in a more private setting. Tracks like Without You and Lonely Together resonated deeply, their soaring melodies and poignant lyrics speaking to themes of resilience, connection, and the bittersweet nature of human experience. The EP was met with critical acclaim and adoration from fans, who saw it as a triumphant return, a sign of his recovery and renewed artistic vigor. It was a different kind of success, measured not in tour dates or global domination, but in the purity of its artistic vision. Tim experienced renewed creative energy and a profound sense of purpose through this music. The act of bringing a song to life, of hearing his internal world externalized in sound, was deeply fulfilling. It was a reminder of why he had started making music in the first place, that quiet boy in Stockholm, lost in Florida studio. Yet, even as he soared on these creative highs, the underlying mental health challenges and anxieties persisted, often in isolation. The creative flow could offer temporary respite, a powerful distraction, but it couldn't fully erase the shadows. He was still battling profound internal demons, even as the world celebrated his artistic resurgence. The music, while a balm, was also a fragile bridge over a deep chasm within him, a chasm that he often felt he had to cross alone. Despite the public perception of renewed health and creative triumph following the release of the Avicii EP, the mid to late stretch of 2017 became a period of profound internal turmoil for Tim. The deceptive calm of his Los Angeles home, the serene beauty of the nature he sought, masked a somber, hidden battle that raged fiercely within him. He was struggling intensely, far more than anyone outside his immediate, closest circle could comprehend. The anxiety, once a buzzing hum, now often erupted into full-blown attacks, suffocating and terrifying. His heart would race, his breath would catch, and a cold dread would seize him, leaving him trembling and utterly depleted. Waves of depression would wash over him, heavy and incapacitating. The vibrant colors of his world would mute, sounds would become distant, and even the simplest tasks would feel insurmountable. He would spend days cloistered, unable to face the light, wrestling with a profound despair that felt like a physical weight on his chest. The lingering effects of substance dependency, though he was actively working against them, were a constant, insidious presence. The cravings, the memories of the relief the pills once offered, would surface with a cruel persistence, particularly during moments of heightened stress or emotional vulnerability. It was a battle fought in solitude, a silent scream against an invisible enemy. His personal journals from this period became a raw, unfiltered confessional. Page after page was filled with his frantic handwriting, a desperate attempt to articulate the suffering he felt unable to voice aloud. He wrote of feeling disconnected, of a profound sense of isolation even when surrounded by friends. He questioned his purpose, his worth, his ability to ever truly find peace. "I feel so much pain," one entry might read, "but I don't know how to stop it. I don't know who to tell. They won't understand." The fear of judgment, the burden he felt he would place on others, kept him from fully revealing the depth of his anguish, even to those who loved him most. His closest confidants, like Dr. Ali Godse, heard fragments of this struggle, sensing the immense weight Tim carried. Ali provided a space for him to speak, to explore the complexities of his mind, but even with professional help, the internal battle was Tim's alone to wage. He would often appear calm, thoughtful, even engaged in conversation, only to retreat into a storm of racing thoughts and heavy chest moments later. The contrast between his composed exterior and his tumultuous interior was stark, a testament to his incredible ability to mask his suffering. The world outside saw Avicii, the artist who had bravely retired from touring, who was now releasing beautiful, introspective music. They saw a man on a path to recovery, finding his way back to himself. But behind that public perception, Tim was a vulnerable, isolated soul, battling profound despair, a sense of disconnection from those around him, and a harrowing struggle to articulate the suffering that consumed him. The deceptive calm of his surroundings only amplified the internal storm, making his hidden battle all the more poignant and tragic. As 2018 dawned, a fragile flicker of hope seemed to ignite within Tim. Despite the unseen battles he continued to wage, a powerful, almost magnetic pull towards creation reasserted itself. He dedicated himself with renewed fervor to working on new material, envisioning a potential third album that would push his artistic boundaries even further. This was to be his statement, a collection of tracks crafted on his terms, free from the external pressures that had once suffocated his creative spirit. He immersed himself in the studio once more, the familiar glow of the screens and the hum of equipment a comforting presence. Collaborations became central to this renewed creative surge. Carl Falk, his trusted friend and musical partner, was frequently by his side. Their sessions were a blend of intense focus and easy camaraderie, a shared language of melodies and beats. They would spend hours, sometimes days, on a single track, meticulously layering sounds, experimenting with new vocalists, chasing that elusive spark of magic. Tim spoke of the direction he wanted this album to take, a deeper dive into the emotional landscape, a fusion of his signature electronic sound with more organic, introspective elements. He wanted it to be honest, raw, a reflection of his journey. There were animated discussions about future releases, about how he would present this new music to the world. He envisioned a return to the creative spotlight, but on his own terms, perhaps smaller, more intimate live performances, curated events that focused on the music rather than the spectacle. The old, grueling touring machine was a ghost he had laid to rest. This new vision was about artistic integrity and personal well-being. He expressed a renewed sense of hope and direction in his music, a belief that this project could be a turning point, a testament to his resilience. In those moments of creative flow, Tim was vibrant, engaged, the light returning to his eyes. He would laugh, share ideas with an infectious enthusiasm, and lose himself completely in the intricate dance of production. It was a glimpse of potential, an artistic resurgence tragically cut short, but in those moments, the future felt bright, full of possibility. Yet, this profound optimism was a fragile thing, often overshadowed by the persistent internal struggle. He fluctuated wildly between these moments of profound creative flow and periods of intense despair. The highs were exhilarating, the lows debilitating. The balance was precarious, a tightrope walk over an abyss. He was building something beautiful, something deeply personal, but the foundation beneath him was still unstable, riddled with the deep cracks of anxiety, depression, and the lingering echoes of his past dependencies. He was fighting a war on two fronts, one external, against the expectations of the world, and one internal, against the demons within. He believed in this final project, poured his very soul into it, but the delicate equilibrium he maintained was ultimately unsustainable, a poignant foreshadowing of the silence that would soon descend. The delicate equilibrium Tim maintained, the fragile balance between profound optimism and intense internal struggle, was ultimately unsustainable. The spring of 2018 in Muscat, Oman, offered a deceptive tranquility, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within him. The air was thick with the scent of frankincense and the gentle murmur of the Arabian Sea, a world away from the thrumming bass and flashing lights that had once defined his existence. He had sought this quiet, this distance, believing it would be his final step towards lasting peace. He spent his days in introspection, meditating, walking, trying to reconcile the warring factions within his soul, all while working on the music that felt like his last, most vital confession. He was pushing towards a new dawn, or so he hoped, a return to the creative spotlight on his own terms. Yet, the shadows that had clung to him for so long, the anxieties, the despair, the lingering echoes of dependency, proved too tenacious, too deeply woven into the fabric of his being. Then, the world stopped. It was a Friday, April 20th, 2018. The news, a whisper at first, then a roar, tore through the global consciousness with the force of a supernova. Tim Bergling, Avicii, was dead. The initial reports were sparse, vague, only confirming the devastating fact that he had been found lifeless in Muscat. The world reeled, caught in a collective gasp of disbelief. How could the architect of such vibrant, life-affirming sound, the embodiment of euphoric energy, be gone? The very idea felt like a cruel paradox, a discordant note in the symphony of his celebrated life. In Stockholm, the news reached Klaus and Anki Bergling like a physical blow. The phone call, cold and clinical, shattered the quiet of their home. Anki, whose life as an actress had taught her to embody emotion, found herself utterly numb, a silent scream trapped in her throat. Klaus, ever the rock, felt the ground beneath him crumble, the world tilting on its axis. Their son, their quiet, brilliant Tim, was gone. The grief was immediate, visceral, a tearing at the very fabric of their being. They stared at each other, their eyes wide with a shared, unspeakable horror, as if confirming the impossible truth in each other's gaze. Across the Atlantic, in Los Angeles, Ash Pornori received the call. The bustling energy of his office, usually a hive of activity, suddenly felt suffocating. He paced, disbelief warring with a sickening dread. He had seen Tim struggle, had wrestled with him over his health and his career, but this was an end he had never truly conceived. A profound sadness settled over him, heavy and cold. He thought of the boy he had discovered, the quiet prodigy with the golden touch, and the weight of what could have been pressed down on him. Carl Falk, in his studio, heard it from a frantic phone call. The music he was working on, perhaps even a track he had started with Tim, abruptly ceased to make sense. He leaned against the mixing desk, the cold metal a poor anchor for the sudden tremor in his hands. He replayed their last conversations, Tim's hopeful plans for the new album, the renewed spark in his eyes. It felt impossible, a cruel joke. A close friend, a creative soulmate, gone. The silence in his studio was deafening, amplified by the echo of Tim's laughter, Tim's melodies. The news spread like wildfire through the digital realm, igniting a global outpouring of grief. Social media feeds, usually a cacophony of fleeting thoughts, transformed into a solemn, unified lament. Millions of fans, from every corner of the earth, posted tributes, shared memories, expressed their shock and heartbreak. The hashtag #RipAvicii trended globally, a digital wreath laid at the feet of a fallen icon. Videos of his performances, once celebrations of life, now felt poignantly elegiac, the euphoric crowds a stark contrast to the somber reality. Aloe Blacc, whose powerful voice had given life to "Wake Me Up," felt a profound sorrow. He remembered Tim's quiet intensity, his innovative spirit, the way he could blend sounds into something universally resonant. Nile Rodgers, the legendary musician who had collaborated with Tim, spoke of his unique talent, his sensitivity, and the immense pressure of the industry. Chris Martin of Coldplay, a friend and collaborator, expressed his heartbreak, recognizing the deep personal challenges Tim had faced. David Guetta, laid-back Luke, and countless other DJs, whose lives intersected with Tim's in the demanding global circuit, shared their condolences, their words laced with a shared understanding of the invisible battles fought behind the glittering facade. The atmosphere was one of profound sadness, confusion, and an urgent, collective need for answers. The world grieved not just for a musician, but for a lost soul, a bright light extinguished too soon. The devastation was palpable, a somber shroud cast over the vibrant world of electronic music, leaving behind a silence that spoke volumes of a universal sense of loss. In the harrowing days and weeks that followed Tim's death, the initial shock slowly began to give way to a desperate search for understanding. The silence from Muscat was deafening, fueling speculation, half-truths, and a raw, public hunger for clarity. Klaus and Anki Bergling found themselves navigating a maelstrom of grief, public scrutiny, and the crushing weight of their son's unfinished story. Amidst their own profound sorrow, they bore the immense responsibility of protecting Tim's memory, of ensuring that his truth, however painful, was finally heard. The decision to release a public statement was not made lightly. It was a moment born of immense courage, a decision forged in the crucible of their own heartbreak. They understood that the world needed to know, not just that Tim was gone, but why. They wanted to transcend the superficial headlines, to cut through the noise, and offer a painful clarity that might, in some small way, prevent future tragedies. They sat together, Klaus and Anki, their hands clasped, their eyes reflecting a shared resolve. They knew the words would wound, would shock, but they also knew the truth was Tim's final, most important message. The statement, released on April 26, was stark, honest, and devastating in its simplicity. It spoke of Tim's struggles, his search for peace, his yearning for meaning. And then, the words that resonated globally, echoing with a profound and heartbreaking finality. He really struggled with thoughts about meaning, life, happiness. He could not go on any longer. The confirmation of suicide, gently veiled yet unmistakably clear, shattered the remaining illusions. It was a gut-wrenching admission, a raw wound exposed for the world to see, yet it was also an act of immense love and profound strength. The impact was immediate and seismic. The global conversation shifted instantly from disbelief to a poignant, empathetic understanding. The image of the carefree DJ, the architect of endless summer anthems, dissolved, replaced by the vulnerable portrait of a young man battling immense internal demons. The statement ignited a crucial, long overdue dialogue about mental health, particularly within the high-pressure, often isolating world of the music industry. Journalists, once focused on the glitz and glamour, began to delve deeper, exploring the unseen toll of fame, the relentless demands on artists. Fans, many of whom had projected their own hopes and dreams onto Avicii, now grappled with the realization that even their idols were profoundly human, susceptible to the same vulnerabilities that plagued so many. Aloe Black spoke out, reinforcing the family's message, sharing his insights into Tim's gentle spirit and the pressures he faced. Dr. Ali Godse, who had offered Tim support in his final years, found his insights on the mental health crisis within the industry amplified, providing a professional lens to the personal tragedy. Klaus and Anki, in their public appearances, carried themselves with a quiet dignity, their voices steady even as their eyes betrayed the depth of their sorrow. They spoke not just as grieving parents, but as advocates, their personal heartbreak intertwined with a fierce determination to effect change. Their courage resonated universally, transforming a private tragedy into a collective call for introspection, a deeper societal awareness of mental health challenges. The painful truth, unveiled with such raw honesty, forced the world to look beyond the dazzling lights and listen to the quiet suffering that often lay beneath, ensuring Tim's story would become a beacon for change. The profound grief that Klaus and Anki Bergling carried, a weight that threatened to consume them, began to transform, slowly, painfully, into a powerful purpose. As 2019 unfolded, they channeled their sorrow into action, driven by an unshakable resolve to honor Tim's memory in a way that truly reflected his gentle spirit and the silent battles he had fought. They understood that Tim's story, now unveiled in its raw honesty, had the power to save lives, to open conversations that had long been shrouded in stigma. Thus, the Tim Bergling Foundation was born. It was not merely a charity, but a living testament to their son's legacy, a phoenix rising from the ashes of their devastating loss. Dedicated to mental health awareness and suicide prevention, the foundation became their new focus, a demanding yet deeply fulfilling endeavor that allowed them to keep Tim's spirit alive, not just in music, but in meaningful change. Klaus, with his grounded wisdom and methodical approach, took on the role of chairman. His voice, steady and calm, became a powerful instrument for advocacy. He spoke with a quiet authority, sharing Tim's story not for pity, but for impact, articulating the systemic failures that contributed to his son's suffering. Anki, with her innate empathy and public presence, became a compassionate voice for the foundation, her words resonating with a mother's love and a universal understanding of pain. Together, they formed a formidable force, their combined strengths propelling the foundation forward. The initial days were filled with the arduous work of establishing a nonprofit, legalities, fundraising, building a team. But through it all, the image of Tim, his quiet intensity, his profound sensitivity, remained their guiding star. They sought out mental health professionals, researchers, and other advocates, forging partnerships to maximize their reach and impact. They understood that this was not a short-term project, but a lifelong commitment, a promise made to their son and to all who suffered in silence. The Foundation's mission was clear: to remove the stigma surrounding mental illness, to provide support for those struggling, and to advocate for policy changes within the music industry and beyond. They organized events, participated in conferences, and launched campaigns, using Tim's global reach to amplify their message. They spoke openly about his anxiety, his depression, his struggles with dependency, demystifying these complex issues and encouraging others to seek help. They created a safe space for conversation, a platform where vulnerability was not seen as weakness, but as a shared human experience. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in from around the world, from fans, from fellow artists, from industry executives who recognized the urgent need for change. The foundation quickly became a powerful force, its message reverberating globally. Klaus and Anki found solace in the work, a profound sense of purpose that transcended their personal pain. Every life touched, every conversation sparked, every barrier broken down felt like a quiet victory, a way of ensuring that Tim's truth resonated far beyond his beats. They were not just preserving his memory, they were actively shaping a future where others might not have to endure the same silent suffering. Their determination was palpable, their hope for systemic change unwavering, as they honored Tim's memory through impactful action and compassion. Amidst the tireless work of the Tim Bergling Foundation, a different kind of tribute began to take shape, a project steeped in both profound grief and enduring artistry. The world, still reeling from Tim's loss, yearned for one last connection to his musical genius. And so, the posthumous album, Tim, began its meticulous, emotionally charged journey towards completion in 2019. The task of bringing Tim's final works to life fell to those who knew his musical language intimately, particularly Carl Falk, his longtime collaborator and friend. The studio, once a vibrant space of shared creation, now felt hushed, imbued with the ghost of Tim's presence. Carl approached the work with a reverence that bordered on sacred. He listened to the fragmented demos, the vocal snippets, the half-finished melodies that Tim had poured his soul into during his final months. Each file was a whisper from the past, a poignant echo of the creative drive that had never truly left Tim, even in his darkest hours. The process was agonizingly bittersweet. Carl, along with other trusted producers and collaborators, found themselves not just mixing tracks, but communing with Tim's spirit. They would meticulously piece together his intentions, interpreting his notes, filling in the gaps with their profound understanding of his signature sound. There were moments of sheer joy, discovering a perfect synth line or a vocal harmony that felt unmistakably Tim. And there were moments of overwhelming sadness, realizing that their friend would never hear the finished product, never witness the world's reaction. Salem Al Fakir and Vincent Pontera, who had contributed to so many of Tim's iconic works, found themselves similarly immersed, their own grief woven into the fabric of the album's creation. The album, Tim, was more than just a collection of songs. It was an emotional final gift, a poignant communication from the artist to his fans. Tracks like Heaven, featuring Chris Martin's haunting vocals, and SOS, with Aloe Black's powerful voice, carried a profound weight, their lyrics taking on new, deeper meanings in the wake of Tim's passing. The album showcased his continued evolution, his genre-bending artistry, and his unwavering commitment to pushing creative boundaries. It was a testament to his unstoppable artistic drive, even when battling such immense personal pain. When Tim was finally released, it was met with an outpouring of emotion. Fans around the globe listened with tears in their eyes, a bittersweet blend of sorrow and gratitude. The album sparked renewed discussions about his unfinished music, his profound influence on electronic dance music, and the sheer depth of his talent. It was a final, cathartic release, a way for millions to grieve collectively and to celebrate the enduring beauty he had brought into the world. For the collaborators, hearing the finished album, seeing it embraced by the world, offered a complex mix of feelings. There was pride in having honored Tim's vision, in having completed his last artistic statement. But there was also a profound sense of melancholy, a stark reminder of the talent lost, the music that would never be made. The album served as a powerful, tangible link to the Tim Bergling they knew and loved, a final, poignant echo of his genius that would resonate for generations to come. It allowed for a deeper understanding of his artistic journey and legacy, cementing his place not just as a hitmaker, but as a true musical visionary whose work transcended mere entertainment. From 2021 onwards, the ripples of Tim Bergling's story continued to expand, transforming into powerful waves that crashed against the shores of the music industry and beyond. His tragic end, unveiled with such raw honesty by his family, became a critical turning point, prompting a profound re-evaluation of artist well-being and the relentless touring demands that had consumed him. The days of pushing artists to their breaking point, of celebrating burnout as a badge of honor, began to face increasing scrutiny. Record labels, management companies, and festival organizers were forced to confront uncomfortable truths. Conversations about mental health clauses in contracts, about mandatory breaks, about providing accessible psychological support for artists, became commonplace rather than exceptions. David Guetta, a veteran of the global DJ circuit, spoke frequently about the need for greater awareness and support for artists, acknowledging the immense pressures that had contributed to Tim's struggles. Laid-back Luke, who had witnessed Tim's meteoric rise and subsequent decline, became an outspoken advocate for sustainable touring practices, urging younger DJs to prioritize their health. The Tim Bergling Foundation, steered with unwavering dedication by Klaus and Anki, became a global beacon for change. Its reach extended far beyond the music industry, sparking vital conversations about mental health in schools, workplaces, and communities worldwide. Klaus, with his calm demeanor, often stood before international audiences, his voice steady as he shared Tim's story, not as a cautionary tale, but as a catalyst for empathy and action. Anki, with her compassionate presence, connected with individuals, offering comfort and hope, transforming personal tragedy into universal advocacy. The foundation funded research, developed educational programs, and campaigned tirelessly to destigmatize mental illness, ensuring that Tim's legacy was not just about music, but about saving lives. His music, too, took on a new, enduring power. The anthems that once soundtracked euphoric nights now carried a deeper, more poignant resonance. Levels became a symbol not just of triumph, but of the heights and depths of human experience. Wake Me Up became an anthem for self-awareness, a call to live authentically. His posthumous album, Tim, continued to serve as a testament to his raw talent and his brave vulnerability, a final, intimate connection to the artist who had given so much. Tim Bergling's story reverberated as a powerful and necessary call for change, ensuring his enduring status as a musical icon whose truth resonated far beyond his beats. He became a symbol of the silent struggles many face, a reminder that behind every dazzling performance, every catchy melody, there is a human being with their own complexities and vulnerabilities. His legacy was etched not just in the annals of electronic dance music, but in the hearts and minds of millions who found courage in his honesty, comfort in his music, and hope in the tireless work of his family. The world, forever changed by his presence and his absence, continued to dance to his rhythms, but now with a deeper understanding, a more profound empathy, and a collective commitment to fostering a world where no artist, no individual, would ever have to suffer in silence again.